Every system fails long before it breaks, and the first signal is almost always confidence. Pressure does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly until correction is no longer possible. Stability can look identical to control, especially when nothing appears to move out of place. But alignment is lost in fractions, and once drift compounds recovery becomes negotiation with damage. The most permanent outcomes begin as minor permissions granted under urgency. By the time certainty feels justified, the margin for reversal has already narrowed beyond sight. Pressure and timing decide whether the first intake becomes feedstock or an unmanageable jam. Even clean steel cannot protect product when load shifts faster than operators can correct. Heat is applied before anything looks like oil, because decay starts immediately once bunches are open. If the steam balance drifts later, stability becomes an illusion built on damaged fruit. Sterilization is not gentleness, it is controlled violence aimed at shutting enzymes down. When pressure spikes or drops, the entire line inherits that mistake for hours. Separation begins by forcing structure to fail in predictable ways, not by cutting corners. If detachment is incomplete downstream, machines spend their energy fighting the wrong material. This phase feels mechanical and steady, but steadiness can hide a slow loss of yield. When flow looks smooth too early, it usually means something valuable stayed behind. Digestors compress time, turning perishable fruit into a controllable mass before it collapses. If temperature drifts, the paste behaves differently, and the press stops being honest. Pressing is where the line commits, because fiber and liquid cannot be recombined once divided. A small misalignment here multiplies into recovery losses that no filter can fully erase. The first oil is always compromised by water, grit, and fines that travel unnoticed. If separation control slips, contamination becomes a permanent resident inside the system. Clarification is a boundary, not a cleanup, separating what can still be rescued from what cannot. When sludge builds, quietly efficiency falls, without any obvious alarm. High-speed separation looks calm from outside, but failure inside is sudden and irreversible. If solids escape this barrier, later refinement becomes expensive damage control. Refining begins by deciding what must be neutralized and what must be preserved. An overdose or delay here turns control into corrosion, even inside food-grade steel. Chemical handling is precise because the line cannot argue with chemistry afterward. If soap stock separation is imperfect, clarity later is only cosmetic. Bleaching is not about beauty. It is about removing what will oxidize and betray storage. When the color looks reassuring, it can still be chemically unstable. Deodorization is a point of no return, stripping what cannot be tolerated in a final oil. Vacuum and steam must agree every second or losses climb invisibly. This stage sounds and feels stable, yet stability can hide volatile compounds escaping too slowly. Understanding separates operators from observers, and silence often equals missed recognition. Fractionation forces the oil to choose a behavior, liquid or solid under disciplined cooling. If crystals form wrong, the product may look clear but fail later, without warning. Filtration here is a final test of honesty, asking whether the system truly removed what mattered. When flow looks effortless, it can be the moment control is already sleeping. Buffering is where finished oil waits, and waiting is where quality can quietly degrade. If oxygen exposure wins, even briefly, the damage cannot be reversed downstream. Packaging begins with empty containers that must behave like perfect instruments at speed. When preforms misfeed, the line loses rhythm and the loss spreads forward. Bottle forming rewards consistency because hot plastic remembers every deviation under pressure. If molds cycle unevenly, defects are sealed into the process long before sealing caps. Filling feels routine, but it is where precision becomes consumer trust in measurable volume. A smooth stream can still hide micro variation that accumulates into rejects. Sealing is not a closure, it is a commitment that cannot be inspected fully afterward. When induction energy is off by seconds, the error survives into every finished unit. Inspection removes the obvious failures, but it also proves how many quiet failures remain unseen. If the reject rate falls too perfectly, it may mean the sensors stop noticing. Consolidation turns separate lanes into one outcome, and one outcome magnifies small timing faults. Loss normalization starts when the flow looks unbeatable, and nobody asks what it costs. Final output is the line showing its true velocity, not its true safety. The fastest movement often arrives when attention is already worn thin. At this endpoint, control is measured only by what makes it true, sealed, and uniform. Once the stream is released at full density, there is nothing left to correct. The system has reached its final state, and nothing beyond this point can alter the outcome. Few recognize which earlier decisions determined this is stillness, because the decisive moments rarely announce themselves. Recognition separates operators from observers, and silence leaves that distinction permanently unsettled.